Hello there, people of the internet. I want to go ahead and talk about future firearms development. Now, whenever it comes to future firearms developments, this is entirely my opinion based, and of course I cannot prove this because the future has not happened yet, and who knows what is going to happen down the road. So, I'm sure a lot of people are going to point out that the United States is adopting a new 6.8 cartridge, and it's a full power rifle cartridge, and it's designed to defeat body armor, and etc., etc. And, well, just because the United States is doing something does not necessarily mean that it is the right thing to do. We are definitely taking a step back in terms of firearms technology, going from intermediate cartridges back to full power rifle cartridges. And whenever it is seen that this is a really, really, really bad idea, then I'm sure that we will swap back to our intermediate cartridges. But I'm not talking about swapping to like a different caliber or a different cartridge or anything like that. I am talking about a fundamental change in firearms technology. Like, for example, we are doing basically the same thing that we've been doing for the past 100 years. We're using smokeless powder to launch a projectile at extreme velocities in a particular direction, using rifling to stabilize a bullet as it goes out in that direction. And well, throughout the past century or so, we have figured out ways of doing this at extremely efficient capabilities to be able to touch out to some pretty extreme ranges with these firearms platforms. I know that touching out to 1,000 yards with a decent rifle is not exactly unheard of. As a matter of fact, I've seen rifles touch out to 2,000 yards. Bottom line, very, very, very impressive distances are able to be achieved with these rifles, way beyond what most people would be able to achieve with a firearms platform such as this. However, firearms developments, we keep playing with the same exact things. Like, we'll make projectiles smaller and lighter so they go faster. We'll try and find powders that burn more efficiently. We'll try and make our cases some sort of hybrid to where we still get the gas seal, but we can increase power. They're different alloys, or they're different materials that are more merged together or something like that. There's all sorts of different fundamental changes to the technology that we're using, but we're still using that base set of technology to burn gunpowder and launch a projectile. And there's only so much that we can do with that. Now, we can make newer, better powders to launch that projectile more efficiently and potentially get more power downrange, or potentially get more accuracy because we have less drop due to more velocity, thus giving us longer range. There's a lot of different things that we can do with this, but they're all fundamentally, like I said, doing the exact same thing. So, whenever it comes to the future of firearms development, a significant change in firearms development, like whenever black powder transitioned to smokeless powder, and we went from muzzle loaders to cartridge firing guns, then we went from cartridge firing guns to repeaters, and then repeaters to self-loading guns. We've been stuck in that self-loading gun plateau for a long time because we're essentially doing the same things. We'll make them more modular, we'll make them more capable, we'll make them more efficient and effective, but we're still using self-loading firearms that use gas pressures and recoil and propellants to launch projectiles and to operate. We're essentially, like I said, doing the same thing that we've been doing for the past 100 years. But what is that next step? Personally, I think the next step is not going to be as far of a next step as a lot of people will say. A lot of people will claim that once we get the technological capabilities, the next step will be laser weapons or some variation of laser weapon. We actually already see laser weapons attached to various vehicles and ships and whatnot that are actually used to take out drones and cameras and whatnot. And yeah, by all means, that is absolutely a possibility. However, the amount of energy that a laser weapon like that would be required, the amount of equipment that a single human would have to carry on his person to be able to produce that energy necessary to create a laser strong enough and have that laser hold enough power to be effective in a combat situation, which could last for a significant amount of time, it just is not feasible. The amount of energy and cost and the lack of capabilities of that laser, just due to the energy constraints that you would have to succumb to because you could only carry what you could carry on your person. It just does not viably make sense for an individual to use a laser weapon, at least not with this current technology that we have. So we would need a fundamental changing increase in our energy-based technologies. Not necessarily just like energy weaponry, but energy-based technology in general. We would need to basically carry around, nuclear power on our person. Every single individual gets nuclear power to be able to control these laser weapons. That's just simply not viable, especially with modern standards. So I don't foresee that happening within our lifetimes. Of course, that could change. The future is not necessarily something that is all that predictable. There have been significant changes in arms technology. Like look at the 1880s. That was a significant change in arms technology in just like 10 years or so. So now let's bump up to something a little bit more realistic, such as a Gauss rifle or something like that. What a Gauss rifle is, at least I believe it is a Gauss rifle, or maybe it's the railgun that I'm thinking of. What it does is it uses magnetic force to pull a projectile through a barrel and launch a projectile downrange, as opposed to using some sort of powder or propellant to send that projectile forward. The issue with that is that Gauss rifle tends to be incredibly heavy because the barrel has to be surrounded with extremely powerful magnets. And in order to have a Gauss rifle of any real significant power, you would need a significant amount of energy going to that system to produce magnets that are strong enough to be able to launch projectiles at extreme velocities. We do see Gauss rifles on, like I said before, battleships and whatnot. There's experimental versions of those rifles out there. Or maybe I'm thinking of railguns. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably because I believe that they're one and the same, but I could be wrong about that. I'm no expert. But they use magnetic force to launch projectiles as opposed to some sort of propellant. And they take a huge amount of energy, and they're incredibly heavy and over-encumbering. And the incredibly large man-portable ones that we have nowadays that are huge and bulky and heavy and whatnot, they don't launch projectiles at near the amount of velocity that would be necessary to be able to take out a target, especially an armored target. And the velocities that are being launched, like from the Gauss rifles that we have nowadays, like the amount of the difference in velocity between the Gauss rifle, the railgun of today's standards, and the projectiles that we can launch from propellants, like there's no contest whatsoever. Those projectiles launched from propellants are dramatically more powerful and dramatically more capable than anything that a current day railgun could be able to do. So we would have to figure out a way to compress the magnetic force inside of that railgun system to be lightweight and portable enough for an individual to be able to carry in a combat situation. And it would have to have enough efficiency to be able to utilize a level of power that a person could carry on their body. And it would have to be efficient enough with that power to be able to sustain multiple shots before needing to recharge that power system. There's just so much variation that goes into something like a Gauss rifle, and there's so much so much power that is needed, and there's so much strength from magnetic force that is needed that I don't foresee something like that being issued as a standard personal rifle. I don't foresee that being the next stage of firearms technology in terms of small arms. Now we might see that with like artillery pieces or something like that, something that is stable and functional and like mounted. That's the word I'm looking for. Something that is mounted in a specific location that doesn't have to be moved around like a regular rifle does. So all of this being said, what do I think would be the most likely outcome for the next generation of firearms? I think that the next fundamental change for firearms technology is going to be a hybrid between a railgun and a propellant firing system. I think that once we figure out that full power rifle cartridges are not what we want because we're stepping backwards in technology, we're going to start looking at faster moving, smaller projectiles that will be able to penetrate body armor and shoot out at incredibly long distances just because of the velocities that these things are going to have. And I think that we're going to go even smaller than 5.56. I think that we're going to start leaning more into the realms of something more along the lines of a 5.7. Now, this right here is just entirely me spitballing here. But this is a tiny, tiny little projectile that's not going to be traveling overly fast. A 5.56 is going to be more effective. But whenever you take that powder-burning 5.7 round and you combine that with the capabilities of a magnetized system that you would find inside of a railgun, you already have the fast velocities of that projectile going down the barrel, and that railgun system will be able to speed that projectile up even farther. One of the big hindrances with a railgun system is that that projectile goes from sitting still to having to move at insane velocities as it goes down the barrel, and that takes a tremendous amount of energy and force. Well, if that projectile is already traveling at insane velocities as it goes down the barrel, then that increased magnetic pull will be able to increase the velocities of that projectile and send it down downrange even faster. I think we're going to see long-barreled rifles that have magnetic systems on them that utilize a very small, very fast-moving powder-based projectile going downrange that is going to be propelled by magnetic forces as well as that gunpowder. Like, I'm not saying 5.7, that's just an example of an already existing cartridge, but let's say we had a 22 caliber let's say we had a 22 caliber or so, such as a 5.7, and with efficient powders, we are able to get that 5.7 moving at, let's say, 3,000 or so feet per second, right? So, with that projectile moving at 3,000 feet per second, that Gauss system, the rail system inside of that system, inside of that platform, would normally be able to project a projectile or launch a projectile. Let's say that normal rail system would be able to launch that same weight, same size projectile from a standstill at about 500 feet per second or so, right? Well, if that thing is already traveling at 3,000 feet per second and you have the increased velocities added on from that magnetic system, increasing the velocity of a projectile is going to be much, much easier than getting a projectile moving from a dead still position. So we will actually see a larger increase in that velocity than that 500 feet per second system. So we would see a larger increase than 500 feet per second, probably more along the lines of like 1,000 feet per second. I'm literally just spitballing here. No math was done. But I do know that if you move something that is already moving and you move it faster, it moves easier than if you try moving something that is at a complete dead standstill. So the powders inside the projectiles would be used to start the projectile and start moving it down the barrel, and then the actual magnetic forces will propel that projectile even faster down that barrel, and so we will see projectiles moving at absolutely insane velocities using systems that would not require a whole lot of power because they would not be all that powerful. Those would not be the primary propellant systems like what we see in modern railguns. Those would be a secondary additional system that would only add velocity to the projectile, and that is what I think we will see in the future. Now, I don't know if anything like that is currently in production. I might even start experimenting with some of that on my own time because that does sound like it would be a fun time. But let's say I had some 9mm. This travels at 1,200 feet per second, probably like 1,300 or so feet per second out of this carbine right here. And let's say along the barrel of this carbine, I had a bunch of magnets that were designed to charge and pull that projectile down the barrel once it is fired. So, of course, I don't have that. This right here is just a little high-point carbine. But if I did have that, instead of going down range at the 1,300 or so feet per second that this is going to be going down range, it would more or less be traveling down range at, I don't know, insert your choice of theoretical number here. Let's say 2,000 feet per second. Even though we have the same weight projectile and the same amount of powder inside of the cartridge, just because of that additional barrel magnetized equipment, that is where we get our increased velocity. And I think that's what we're going to see in the future. We would not have a whole lot of additional weight because we would not have a lot of power needed from that rail system. and we would still be rocking very lightweight, very small cartridges, as opposed to having to lug around full power cartridges, relying only on a powder propellant system. I think that there's probably going to be the most viable change in firearms technology that we're going to see in the future. We're going to see hybrids of things that need to be more efficient. So we're going to see mixes of them, since we don't have the efficiency that we need as of right now. Anyway, folks, let me know what you guys' thoughts are. I wanted to go ahead and make this video because this is something I've thought about for a little while. What do you guys think will be the next wave of firearms development? What do you think will be the next big step in firearms development? All that being said, thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.